Well, we do have had some funding from Reader's Digest without any strings. In case it does become a book, they would have first access to it. Uh, this is August 7th, 1968. We're in
Right.
the office of James Manire, and we will proceed to talk to him, we being Dr. Ann Trotter, and this is David Yellen. Well, all right, I will, Mr. Manire. We, as you said, we're interested in the strike in all events and leading to and from it and up into the assassination. We're not detectives, and we're not writing a mystery story. We're trying to, as closely as possible, recreate the setting of the time, so that if you could, which becomes more difficult as each day goes by, kind of recall the events and also how you felt then, rather than through the prism of today and looking back. And I know it's difficult, but if you could...
It shouldn't be difficult, because there were very pointed feelings that I developed as it progressed.
Could you recall when your first acknowledgement, awareness, contact with any of the events?
Yes, I'd say this in general. Here was my association with the entire matter. I was called on by the mayor the Sunday before the strike began to discuss it with him, to just talk about it. I happened to go over to his house. This was probably in early February. I'm not going to know the dates of anything. I don't imagine. I was in it as a more or less counselor to the mayor with 3 or 4 other individuals.
Do you recall who they are?
Yes, I can tell you who they were. Throughout, in other words, I participated in the state court injunction proceedings. I participated in the federal court injunction proceedings, which were undertaken after King's March and had the purpose of trying to establish some guidelines for the second march, in view of the fact that there had been this outbreak of violence in the first march. The basic point of the second injunction, of course, was to give the federal government, through the federal courts, a certain supervisory power over the march itself, to protect. Really, the principal thing was to protect Dr. King, and that was stated to the court by Mr. Janati, who actually was chief counsel in the matter before the federal court. The idea being, of course, to ask the court for an injunction, and the injunction would take the form of setting up regulations or guidelines for the march to protect the marchers, Dr. King, the citizens of Memphis, and everyone concerned. That was the objective. Prior to the actual injunction hearing, the court, who was Judge Bailey Brown, issued a temporary restraining order, which is a customary thing in federal.
You're talking about April 3rd.
Jurisprudence. This is right. That was to hold everything until he could have a hearing, which he had, I believe, beginning the next day. That temporary restraining order did hold everything for a matter of some hours or perhaps a day. Now, then I was a member of the city group which negotiated or participated in the mediation proceedings before the Undersecretary of Labor and Mr. Frank Miles here in Memphis, and terminated in a so-called settlement of the strike. So I suppose I was in it in every aspect, and throughout all this I had conferences with King's representatives, private conferences, and different communication with different individuals here and there in an effort to determine how it could be resolved, if at all. Well, so that is my background in it.
Yes. Well, it's certainly fine. And if we could, we would like, as much as possible, your recall of...
Start at the beginning?
Start at the beginning, and any of the conferences that you had, because
all
that
right.
So is part of the story. May I start you off? Why were you called on February 5th? What was the information?
I am a friend of Henry Loeb's, and from time to time he asked me, as well as some others who have generally been Walter Armstrong, Tom Pruitt, the city attorney Frank Giannotti, one of the members of the legal staff, Myron Halley, and one or two others that I'll think of as we go along, have been men who have been having breakfast with him every once a week and talking about general city
sort of
problems.
a kitchen cabinet.
That's what it's been called, I suppose.
Oh, really?
But that was the reason, plus the fact that I've agreed to serve on the city legal staff at the request of the mayor and a couple of others in order to help the new form of government get off the ground here. And so I am a member, and at that time was a member of the city legal staff.
Oh,
so I'm
you
a
did
lawyer
have-
for the city.
I see.
And I would hope that would come to a reasonable end before too long.
Just for information, you don't have to answer, is this a paying job?